Live with local comforts. Love community over commuting. Live in a home built by Glenveagh. Love where you live. Glenveagh, home of the new.
Welcome to Through the Front Door, brought to you by Glenveagh Homes. On this podcast, we'll be consulting a wide range of experts, from mortgage brokers and architects to interior designers and sustainability experts, who will be addressing those burning questions you've always wanted to know the answer to. On the podcast this week, I'm joined by partner and head of real estate in Kane Tuohy Solicitors, Paul McCutcheon.
Vendor to purchaser can actually happen very, very quickly. It's everything that's around the transaction that can cause it to stretch and to drag. So, the key advice I give to everybody going into any transaction, whether you're buying or whether you're selling, is like any good Boy Scout or Girl Scout, be prepared.
From their experience to mine, we'll be sure to cover all the bases to put you, the listener, on your way to finding your perfect home. Paul, the big question on most first-time buyers' lips is conveyancing. Do I need somebody to conveyance a property for me, or can I do it myself? I sort of look at them with my eyes popping out of my head going, yeah, you absolutely do need a solicitor. That's where I would be spending my money. Can you tell us what you do exactly and what is the conveyancing process?
Okay, well, as a solicitor, my job is to facilitate the commercial agreement between the vendor and the purchaser and ensure that the property gets sold as quickly as possible. In terms of, I suppose, the actual conveyancing process, that's the process of transferring title from one person, title of property from one person to another. So if I was acting for a purchaser, I would be reviewing the title of the property. I would be reviewing the planning status of the property. I would be ensuring that it's properly registered in the land registry, that the development of the property is in order with the planning permission, and various other things. If my purchaser was, as most first-time purchasers are, purchasing the property with the benefit of a mortgage, I would also be giving an undertaking to their bank that I would make sure that I do all those things in terms of checking title and checking planning and making sure everything is in order, and that I will also register their title correctly in the land registry, and then subsequently provide a certificate of title to the bank to confirm that everything is in order. Certainly, if a purchaser is buying with the aid of a mortgage, they have to have a solicitor. And given that people's houses and people's homes are probably the most expensive purchase they'll ever make in their life, I would think it would be prudent to say, despite being a solicitor, and I appreciate there's a degree of, well, I would say this, wouldn't I? In saying it, a good solicitor is essential.
And listen, I wholeheartedly agree with you. There are the few odd people out there, and I don't mean odd as in funny, haha, funny, peculiar. I mean odd in that they will actually conveyance their own property, which number one, I wouldn't have the appetite for it. But in terms of new homes, right, whereby contracts, I'm assuming, are more or less ready to go because of the land, the design of the property, the build, all of that. Is there a difference between conveyancing a secondhand home and a new home?
The principles are the same in that you still need to make sure that your title is correct, your planning is in order. There are, I suppose, slightly more bells and whistles to the conveyance of a secondhand home, in that there are tax issues to look after. You need to make sure that the local property tax has been paid up to date. There's also, because it is a second-hand home, there are additional queries that as a purchaser you would look at. You'd want to make sure that, for example, there hasn't been any unauthorized development in respect of the property. That, for example, a purchaser hasn't put, a house owner hasn't put an unauthorized extension on the back of the property, which generally won't happen in a new build because they have the one planning permission for 100, 150, 200 houses. So I suppose it's a much more particular process when you're selling secondhand properties, because every house is different once it's a secondhand property. When you're buying a new home, particularly from a development, most of the properties are the same planning, same structure, same title.
And actually, you know what, just speaking about new homes, can you, in that case, because as you say, it's a bit more straightforward, it's the same title, it's the same design, it's the same build, all of that, no extensions that need to be investigated in terms of going back for retention or anything like that, right? Can you actually tell a first-time buyer within reason how long the process is going to take? Is that an unfair question?
No, and there is for the simple. Well, again, a good solicitor's answer. It depends on the individual case.
Okay.
If the house has already been built and the purchaser is organised, then you can say, well, look, this can happen in 4 to 6 weeks. The issue is for a lot of first-time buyers at the minute that they are buying properties off plans, and so the properties need to be constructed and then need to be snagged. And that can take a varying amount of time. And I think it's important for purchasers in that situation to realize that, that time frame isn't wholly within the control of their builder. There may be delays, as we've all heard about, in the supply chain and difficulty in getting the raw materials to build. But there's also with new homes the issue that the property needs to be connected up to the Irish water main system. It also needs to be connected up by the ESB, which, while they do work with the developer is very much at their mercy as to when they're available to do that. If the property is built and it's standing stock, then it can happen in 4 to 6 weeks. But for that to happen, the purchaser needs to be as prepared as the builder is to get the sale over the line. And I think this is, in the conveyancing process at large, this is an issue which I don't think vendors or purchasers going into transactions appreciate, that they need to have their homework done at the start of a transaction to make sure this happens promptly. I act for a number of developers, and there is, in many instances, significant delays because the purchaser hasn't done their homework. So, for example, has allowed their mortgage approval to lapse, hasn't got their house insurance in place, hasn't got their life insurance in place. So,
and do you need sight of that? Do you actually, sorry for interrupting you, but do you need sight of, obviously approval in principle, 100% you need sight of, but do you also need sight of house insurance or life insurance as well?
Well, if you're acting for the purchaser, well, you don't need sight of it. You need to make sure that they have it, because you can't draw down your mortgage funds unless the bank have it. And more to the point, the bank are happy with it. From the vendor side, all you really want to see is the money. Yeah. But there are multiple occasions where I'm speaking with the purchaser solicitor and it transpires that, as I say, a loan offer has lapsed, or the bank has an issue with the insurance policy which is being offered, and this just delays the process. Similarly, when if you're selling a house and selling a second-hand house, the first time the solicitor generally hears about it is when the client rings you up and says, "I've just sold my property. Can you sell it, please?" And I'm then in a situation where I'm going, well, where are the title deeds? If the title deeds are with the bank, that can take 3 to 4 weeks to get those from the bank. And you're also then looking at a situation where, for example, if works have been carried out and the purchaser or the vendor doesn't necessarily have all the necessary certification in place in terms of getting compliance with building regulations, compliance with planning permission, or even if planning permission isn't required, an opinion that the development was exempt from planning permission, which any prudent purchaser is going to look for. Again, that takes time and adds to the process. So the actual conveyancing, the transfer of title from vendor to purchaser, can actually happen very, very quickly. It's everything that's around the transaction that can cause it to stretch and to drag. So, the key advice I give to everybody going into any transaction, whether you're buying or whether you're selling, is like any good Boy Scout or Girl Scout, be prepared.
Give me 3 examples of preparation, that like 3 everyday normal examples of preparation, that it's like you said there, the first time you hear that you're going to be asked to conveyance properties when they say, actually, we're sale agreed. And you're going, right, that's interesting. Why didn't you tell me that when you were putting the for sale sign up?
We'll talk about it from a purchaser's perspective first.
Yeah.
So if you're a purchaser, I think, and particularly a first-time purchaser, the 3 key things I would say to have ready is, firstly, get your help to buy application in. So know get your access code, get your application number, and know what your help to buy allowance is going to be. Because particularly if the house is ready and you want to move quickly, you want to be able in a position to submit your help to buy application claim to the revenue commissioners as soon as the contracts are exchanged. Because if that happens and you get that back to the vendor solicitor promptly, the help to buy funds will be available generally within a week. The second thing is to make sure you have your life insurance and your property insurance teed up and ready to go. If you're using a broker, get that done at the outset so that you have it ready, because it can take time. Because particularly with life insurance, sometimes the insurers will require medical checkups and medical sign-off before they'll issue the life insurance. So don't leave this to the last minute. Get it done early and get it in place. And the last thing is keep an eye on your mortgage offer, and in particular, the length of time your mortgage offer will last for and when it will expire. Because again, there's nothing worse than purchasers thinking, I've got everything done here. I've got my HTB, I've got my insurance in place, and my mortgage offer is expired. Because
really common. Really common.
And particularly in a new build situation with a first time buyer where you're maybe not going to have access to the house for 6 to 9 months. And even in situations where it's a straightforward renewal, it can take 2 or 3 weeks to get the new offer out and then signed up. And then you have to start the drawdown process, which can take another week to 10 days. So those are the 3 key things. The other thing that I'd be aware of is if there is a change of circumstance after you've signed the contract and when you're waiting for the property to close. So say, for example, if you change jobs or move jobs, is that going to impact on your mortgage offer? Because a lot of banks will be wary of people moving jobs and being on a probationary period. So it's just important that if there's a significant sort of life change in that regard, that you talk to your broker or you talk to your bank and you just get their sign off as to, no, that's fine. The mortgage offers remains in place. No need for any changes. Or if they have any further requirements, you can identify those quickly and you can act on them.
And most of those approval and principles, as you know, are for 24 weeks, the majority of them. And 24 weeks, I'm telling you, is the fastest period of time in life when you're looking to purchase a property, whether it be a new home or a secondhand home. And taking into account the current economic situation and the slow in new builds, actually most first-time buyers are sort of up for purchasing either a new home, if they can manage to get one, or a secondhand home. And they tend to come to me as a buyer's agent when the approval in principle, we've got 4 to 6 weeks left. And then you are seriously off at the races, because I suppose most people, once they have their approval in principle, they don't want to revisit the bank where possible.
And it's totally understanding, because mortgages and insurance and all this good stuff, it's not the fun stuff. It's not sexy. It's not, where am I going to put the sofa, or what sofa am I going to buy, or how big a TV, how big a TV can I fit in this wall? But in terms of taking the stress out of the conveyancing process, it's essential. And like all things which are essential but unpleasant, it's like ripping the plaster off off your arm. Just do it and do it quickly and get it done. And once it's done, the pressure's off to a degree. So I think people just need to be aware of that. In terms of selling, what I would be suggesting to people is, if they are, if we can use this in our sister podcast, out through the whole door, as the case may be. But when you decide you're going to put your property on the market, talk to your solicitor then. And even if it's a case of the sale doesn't go through, you'll get prepared. So title deeds, let's get those in. Have you carried out any development work to the property? No. If the answer to that is no, then fine. If the answer to that is yes, well, let's just make sure that we don't have, we've got all the planning documentation and approval documentation that's required. Has your life circumstances changed in the meantime? Have you separated from your partner? Because all of these things will feed in. So a call to your solicitor when you decide to put the property on the market will speed the process up hugely once the sale is agreed for both sides of the party. And it means that a lot of the delay that people associate with, and which in fairness, does happen with the conveyancing process, but it can easily be avoided by just, as I say, talking to people at the start of the process and understanding exactly what you need to do to, certainly on your side of the thing, not have any excuses for any delays.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly on all of that. Line up your ducks. It's amazing the amount of people who don't. It's extraordinary. But can I ask you something, Paul? Actually, you were talking about, the conveyancing system and all it entails. The conveyancing process and all it entails. And, as you rightly said, this is not a transaction that takes place very often in one's lifetime. Yeah, you might do it once. You might do it thrice. You might. Why does it seem that the Irish conveyancing system takes an undefined period of time? It seems to be a very long, tricky process in the main. There are other jurisdictions around the world whereby, contracts are drawn down immediately after a property is sale agreed, and the next thing is 3 weeks later you've got your keys. Now, I don't know how the rest of the world is managing that. I know where this has happened actually in North America and Canada particularly. It seems to be really straightforward. Why does our system seem to be protracted and complicated?
The system is protracted and complicated. As I say, if we had our ducks in a row, or if I'm selling you a new house and we agree to do it and the house is built and the purchaser is in a position to draw down the mortgage money straight away, we could complete a sale in 3 to 4 weeks without putting anybody under any due pressure. So I think a lot of it is with regard to, as I say, the organization of the parties that are involved, and the fact, I suppose, as well, that a lot of the horror stories that you hear about lengthy transactions are caused by either delays in the build process, which, as I say, the majority of the times, not every time, but the majority of the times are outside control of the developer or builder. And also for the fact that you will have chains of transactions where, particularly for secondhand homes, where there's 3 or 4 transactions need to close before you can get your property. And I don't think that's not a situation that's unique to Ireland or the UK or anywhere else in the world. That'll happen in Canada as well. Nobody wants to be out of their home before they can get into their new home. I think historically, the registration of title issue has been a problem. There is work going on at the minute and has been going on for the past 10 years to update the registration of title system. And certainly every transaction of a residential property or a commercial property at the minute has to be registered in the land registry. That's a gradual process. It's not going to happen overnight, but that will speed up matters because it will make title much more straightforward. And I think from a planning perspective as well, you're also looking at a situation in Ireland where you have something like 32 different planning authorities rather than a centralized planning authority, a centralized planning record. So if you're having to search against, the planning register for a property in Sligo, it can sometimes take longer than possibly a search in Offaly or Meath or Fingal. And there's no central place to sort of register. For example,
Paul, would you be in favour of a central land registration, big box where all the planning authorities, just where everything's logged in and it's much easier to search? I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly, but
yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, from a legal perspective, anything that's going to simplify the conveyancing process is something that I'm in favour of. Under the planning system in Ireland is currently under the microscope, and the government have said that they will, be introducing proposals to update, and to use I suppose, a construction term, to renovate and carry out home improvements to the planning system. And it's overdue and it needs to happen. But at the minute, as I say, it's quite piecemeal, and it's one of the factors that sort of, planning is important for property. You need to make sure that your property has been built in accordance with planning permission and the building regulations. You need to make sure that any developments to the property tick the necessary boxes, and it can take time. It's like, restaurant reviews on the internet. You never hear of people posting reviews saying it was fine. It was, absolutely, no real problem, didn't cause us any stress. It was a perfectly adequate meal. What you get is people going, that was the worst meal ever. Look at what happened to me. This is just dreadful. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, and I'm not saying that should happen. But I think for the majority of people, the conveyancing process is reasonably smooth, hopefully reasonably hassle-free. And unfortunately, if you get stuck in a situation where it just seems to be dragging on ad nauseum, you're unfortunate, because you're one of the few where that happens.
I wholeheartedly agree, Paul, about your review analogy. I think we only ever really hear the bad stories, the unsuccessful stories, or the stories whereby conveyancing hasn't gone very smoothly. And also, a review is only one person's opinion, so they can go and take a hike. Can we touch on costs? Mm-hmm. Do you mind if we talk about fees just a little bit before I let you go, particularly around new homes? And if you're, as you said there, if you act for a number of developers, so therefore you may well be acting for first-time buyers who are purchasing new homes. Is there a fixed rate for first-time buyers in new homes, more so than there might be for a second-hand property, taking into account that there's more digging to be done in a second-hand property?
What I would say is, I'll make a general comment first. And again, yes, people listening may feel free to say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But the conveyancing process is a complicated, involved process. And conveyancing fees have been driven down by significantly over the past 20 years. Your home is probably, as I mentioned before, the most expensive purchase you're likely to make in your life. Yet people seem to be out there looking to get the lowest price for their solicitor, because sure, what are they doing? But what they're doing is actually making sure that the property that you are buying, and that you are, in most cases, are borrowing significantly to buy, is going to have an appropriate title and the necessary planning documentation, so that when you come to sell it in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years' time, there's no problem. The other thing, as we've mentioned before in the podcast, is it's not just about the conveyancing, it's about engaging with the bank, because a solicitor, to a degree, is working for two people when they're buying a private house. They're working for the purchasers, but they're also working for the bank to register the bank's mortgage, to make sure that the funds can be drawn down properly so that you can buy your house. The solicitor will also be possibly assisting you with your help to buy process. So it is an involved and complicated process. And as I say, it does surprise me sometimes that people seem to want to engage the solicitors at the lowest price possible. If you were having heart surgery, you wouldn't be going out there and saying, well, gosh, this guy will do it for X, but this guy will do it for half that price, so I'm going to go to him. You'd want to go to the best person possible. So I'm not going to give a comment as to what price you should pay. But the point I would make is, if you pay peanuts, you can get monkeys. There's a lot of solicitors have very good operations and very slick operations and can do it for a very competitive price, and you'll get an excellent service and they will tick all the boxes for you. But the key advice I give to anybody when they are buying a property is make sure you engage a solicitor that you has a good reputation and that you feel comfortable dealing with, because your solicitor should be a little bit like your doctor and your dentist. You want to develop a relationship with them that will you'll go through in life, because there's lots of other things you ought to be doing with your solicitor that lots of people don't, particularly after buying a house. So if you're buying a property, I would, if you're looking for a solicitor, don't necessarily look for the cheapest one. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to other people who've embarked and have completed the journey that you're doing
and listen to the good
buying
stories.
property, and take their advice. There will be good stories and there will be bad stories, and there will be and that'll give you a really good steer as to who you should go to and how much you should expect to pay. The other thing that I would suggest in that regard, in terms of your engagement with your solicitor, is I would always recommend people, particularly first-time buyers, once they've purchased their property, to put in place 2 other documents which their solicitor would be able to help them with. The first is you need a will.
Yeah, very important.
More than half the people in Ireland don't have a will. And when you buy a property, you suddenly become worth an awful lot of money. You were to die, the life insurance that you take out as part of your mortgage process will kick in, will pay off the mortgage for you, and the property will be there to be managed. Now, for most people, if they buy with a partner or they buy with their spouse, they'll want the property to be left to them. But that's not always the case. It's a different sort of society now. Relationships are more complicated, and you want to make sure that your assets and the value in your estate passes to the people that you want to pass it to. So it's essential that you make a will, and I'd strongly advise you to talk to a solicitor about that, because there are lots of legal complexities in there that may need to be taken into account depending on what your wishes are.
I'm very glad you said that, Paul, because, sorry for interrupting, I'm very glad you said that, because it's exactly what people don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about a potential demise and making a will.
Again, it's not as much fun as where can I put the 50-inch TV?
Yeah.
The other document that I would strongly encourage people to talk to their solicitor about, and to my mind, it's actually more important than a will, is to put in place what's known as an enduring power of attorney. An enduring power of attorney is a document that allows you to appoint the people that you want to manage your affairs if you become unable to manage your affairs yourself. So if you were involved in an accident or you have a stroke or something horrible like that were to happen to you, this document would kick in and allow the people that you want to manage your affairs to manage your affairs. If you don't have an enduring power of attorney in place, the only alternative that people have to help manage your affairs and assist you is to have you made a ward of court. And while the wards of court office do great work, I would imagine 99% of people would want to be able to say, well, actually, I want my wife, I want my sister, I want my father, I want my son or daughter
to act for me,
to be looking after me, and to be the one making the decisions as to my care and my welfare. And as I say, from my perspective, that's more important than a will, because depending on your outlook, once you're dead, that's it. You're not going to know what's going to happen to your estate and to your affairs. But if you're alive and you need to be supported and managed and cared for the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life, an enduring power of attorney is essential. And both those documents, should be put in place by a solicitor. And I'd encourage everybody who's buying a house, whether they're a first-time buyer or they're a second or third or fourth-time buyer, if you don't have those documents in place already, and the vast majority of people in Ireland do not. Some choose to say, yes, that's a great idea, let's put it in place. Some will say, I'm well ahead of you, we've already got that. And a lot of them will just go, no, we'll do that later. And of course, if they say we'll do that later, they're kicking the can down the road and they're not going to do it. But they're 2 important documents. And as I say, to my mind, they're essential. But again, it's for a lot of people, as you say, it comes with considering potential outcomes that aren't particularly pleasant and you'd rather just not think about, which is totally understandable. But I do think they're essential for people to have.
And on that note, Paul McCutcheon, you've reminded me to no longer kick the can down the road, because I need to do my own will and my own enduring power of attorney. Now, what does that say about me?
There's lots of solicitors who don't have wills and enduring powers of attorney, so you'd be an excellent company.
You'd think it might all be sorted, but it's not. But it's very important information. It really, really is. Paul McCutcheon, partner and head of property at Kane Tuohy Solicitors. It was very nice talking to you. As always, really good, solid, straight advice and simple advice too, to be frank. Simple advice that just needs to get all the boxes ticked and engage with your solicitor. And I would also say, speak to a solicitor who you have a nice relationship with, who you get on well with.
Yeah, absolutely. Be prepared.
Be prepared. Thanks a million.
Take care.
Live with local comforts. Love community over commuting. Live in a home built by Glenveagh. Love where you live. Glenveagh, home of the new.